of Steelrising. So Steelrising is the new action RPG from Spiders. So Spiders are the developers of a bunch of games I love, and some of them, are not so great, but I still love them all the same. That includes things like Of Orcs and Men, The Technomancer, Mars Warlogs, and more recently GreedFall, which I've talked about in the show quite a bit. But those games were more sort of traditional action RPGs in a sense. With Steelrising, they've moved into the Souls-like genre, and this is a Souls-like through and through. It basically, I know when this game was announced, my initial thoughts were, oh, this is going to be like your GreedFall, where you got like a hub world where you can like towns and cities and subquests and dialogue options. They have some of that stuff, but it's scaled back, and it's really all about the Soul-style combat, the Soul-style level design, the whole risk reward, finding a bonfire style thing, having to get back to your body to recover your soul's equivalent. It's got an Estus flask, so it's basically Souls. But I put about probably 20 hours into this game. I was planning on completing it to review on the show, but unfortunately I didn't start the game for a while because there were a couple of issues with it and a couple of broken achievements. So I decided to wait for them to patch them to make sure it was all good and didn't cause any issues. And even in the first patch, they've introduced a new game plus mode. They've done a lot of rebalancing. Spiders are really good at actually, doing those ongoing optimizations with their games. So it's really, really cool. But Steelrising, so the setting is, if anyone doesn't know, it's set in like a fictionalized version of like the 1700s in Paris, under like the reign of King Louis the 14th, and 16th, and it's basically the whole of Paris has been taken over by these crazy robots called automats. So you play as one of them called Aegis, and you're basically on behalf of the Queen having to figure stuff out and take down, basically just save Paris. And it's a really unique setting. It's definitely one that I think a lot of people are going to look at and go, that's not my thing, but it is cool to see a Souls-like in a completely different style. Because like from the architecture, it's very Baroque, it's very like Gothic as well. So there are times when it does remind me of Bloodborne in a sense that there's lots of rundown streets and, carriages on fire and things, but then it's got the whole French architecture. So it's really neat in that regard. But my first impressions of the game actually weren't that great. So I started playing it, and it opens with a cutscene, and it's like the cutscene between a conversation between the Queen and her assistant, and it goes on for ages. Honestly, it's really boring. Then it introduces your character, and I'm thinking, man, that first cutscene will just push so many people away. And the first thing people are probably going to do is like skip it. So, and the thing is, it does give you context around the game, but it's like, I think they really could have started way better.
Like, and then the game could have been naked or something, or in a bath while she's talking to you to keep you intrigued.
Or have her tits out, like Assassin's
Creed. Exactly. At least that way
maybe
you'd be
only at the start of the game,
watching.
not later in the game.
Only at the start, and then after that, it's fine. You don't need to.
Or maybe the modding community's done their bit on that part. But even the gameplay at first, I'm like, oh no, Spiders, what have you done? This just doesn't feel right. Nothing felt right at the beginning. But what I realized was it was the weapon type that I came with the class I chose. I just really didn't like the moveset. And as soon as I started to get a couple more weapons, and I'm like, oh, this feels way better. And the first area is quite linear. And then after you get past those initial couple of like maybe the first hour of the game, if you don't get stuck on a boss or anything, then it really does open up, and then the game starts to shine at that point. But unfortunately, I think for some people, especially, if this game ever gets added to Game Pass or anything, I think it will push them away in that first hour. So that's a bit of a shame. But past that point, I think that the game really started to click with me a lot more. It's not perfect, but there's definitely a lot to love there. So a few things. So the combat is, as I said, it's basically Souls-like. They do have some unique elements. So in general, the combat feels a little awkward, but weirdly, once you get used to it, it plays into the theme because you're a robot fighting other robots. So the fact that your character, the movement feels a bit off at first, ends up actually feeling right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Weirdly, the slight jank ends up working in its favor in some regards.
Would you say it's kind of like Hellpoint, where it's not quite?
Well, it's
polished?
more like, I think Well, no, it's way more polished than Hellpoint. This
Okay.
is definitely on another level than a game like that. And I love Hellpoint. It's more that like your character movement doesn't. It feels very artificial, but then it's like, wait, they are a robot,
Well, it makes
right?
sense,
So
yeah.
so it does actually. Even your character ages in like standing there in conversations, like her arm will twitch, like, and it feels weird, but it's kind of feels right at the same time. But in terms of some more unique stuff, so they've got a really neat mechanic that I didn't really use properly for first half of the game, and I regret it now, which was a cooldown mechanic. So, you know, in Souls-likes, how you run out of stamina, and then it's like, oh, I can't take any action. I've got to wait for my stamina to come back a bit. What happens is if you run out of stamina in Steelrising, your robot character overheats, and you can't do anything for a while. But what you can do is you can press a cooldown button. And the cooldown button will give you stamina back, but it will cause frost damage. So it's basically okay because it's literally cooling you down. But if you get the timing right, and it's really tough, but you can get a perfect cooldown, which instantly replenishes your stamina, and then you keep going. So once I got used to it, the whole thing is in combat, you attack, and you actually might want to use all your stamina up, perfectly time the cooldown, and then just keep attacking. And you, depending on what your stats are, you might be able to do that multiple times, so you can just keep whacking away at enemies. So it's pretty cool.
That's a cool concept. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other cool things that I don't really have that much time to get into. But there is there's a module system where you can unlock and upgrade different modules on your, like, there's the normal stats you upgrade, but these modules are like equipable things, but you've got to upgrade your module slot to a slot 2 and 3 to upgrade, to insert the higher tier things. So there's a lot of options there. In terms of the level design, it's basically like your Soul style, but the unfortunate part is some of it's great, some of it's not so great, because these areas are pretty large and there's so many shortcuts and there's so many back streets that you can get really lost. And I'm going to kind of break tradition here and say that this is one of the first Souls-like I've played where I think it actually should have had an area map, because there's times when I think that you can get lost quite easily. So, but look, it's, as I went further on, they started introducing more variation in the areas. I'm like, thank God I'm not in so many city streets anymore. I'm in like a quarry and things like that. The last couple of things I'll say, so difficulty for Souls veterans, this game is probably a bit on the easy side. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just that, this is not a hard game at all. They are actually balancing it to make it a bit more difficult, because you can cheese a lot of the bosses pretty easily just by using items and abilities. But for newcomers, it's spot on. And there is actually an assist mode that you can toggle on, and you can modify a few things. So for a Souls like this is pretty unique. So you can like change the amount of damage you receive. You can change whether or not your souls disappear if you don't get back to your body. You can change how easy it is to get those perfect cooldowns. So the fact they've got this there is cool. But beware, if you put assist mode on, it will lock you out of a few of the more challenging difficulty achievements. So if you're a completionist, don't use the assist mode if you want to get them all, basically. But look, it's a cool game. I'm enjoying it. I think for hardcore Souls fans, I think this is definitely worth it. And for people that are a fan of like Spiders, other games, I think this is definitely going to appeal to people. For more casual Souls players and other people, I think that this is something you should probably wait to either get on cheap, or all of Spider's games have basically been added to Game Pass over the years. GreedFall, Technomancer, they've all been PS Plus, things like that, Games of Gold. This game will get added to those services at some point. So I think that, for everyone else, it's worth a try when it jumps on one of those services. So, yeah, it's Steelrising.
Definitely keen. I'll try it.